When an appraiser told the young woman her only inheritance was a worthless, condemned house, he couldn't have known about the secrets sealed inside its walls. What she found there would not only change her future, but rewrite her entire past. If you've ever felt like the world has given up on you, stick around and hit that subscribe button, because this story is for you. The day I turned 18, the world gave me a cardboard box and a handshake. The box contained every material thing I owned: 3 changes of clothes, a worn paperback copy of a book I no longer remembered reading, a photograph of a woman with my eyes and a sad smile, and a stack of paperwork that proved I existed. The handshake came from Mr. Albright, the director of the Northwood Group Home for Children, a man whose smile never quite reached his tired, gray eyes. He wished me luck. It sounded like an apology. For 2 years, Northwood had been my home, if you can call a place with beige walls, scheduled meals, and a rotating cast of temporary siblings a home. It wasn't a prison, not exactly, but freedom felt a lot like being pushed out of a boat in the middle of a very large, very quiet lake. I stood on the curb, the box feeling heavier than it should, and watched the beige building shrink in the rearview mirror of the city bus. The air inside smelled of disinfectant and faint, lingering regret. My own, I supposed, and the regrets of all the kids who had come before me, whose ghosts probably still roamed the linoleum halls, looking for something they'd left behind. I had nothing to leave behind but an empty bed. My next stop was the County Services Building, a place that managed to be both imposing and deeply, profoundly weary. It was a monument to institutional beige. My caseworker, a man named Mr. Davies, was waiting for me. He was a good man, I think, but stretched thin like an old rubber band. Over 100 cases just like mine. He had the same tired eyes as Mr. Albright, the official uniform of adults who worked with broken children. We sat in his cubicle, a small square of organized despair decorated with a drooping spider plant and a picture of 2 smiling children who were not his cases. "Happy birthday, Elara," he said, sliding a thick manila envelope across the desk. It landed with a soft, final thud. "This is it. You're officially an adult. All your paperwork is in there. Social security card, birth certificate, final release forms. You're on your own." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. On my own. The words echoed in the small space. It was what I had wanted, what every kid in the system dreams of, but now that it was here, it felt less like freedom and more like a fall. He cleared his throat, tapping a second, smaller envelope. This one was different. It was crisp, white, and bore the letterhead of a law firm. "There is one other thing," he said, his tone shifting from procedural to cautious. "Something was left for you, an inheritance." My heart gave a painful lurch. Inheritance. The word was foreign, something from books and movies, for people with families and histories that fit into more than a single cardboard box. "From who?" I whispered. "Your grandmother, Maeve O'Connell." The name hit me like a physical blow. Maeve. The woman in the photograph. The woman who had raised me for the first 8 years of my life in a house that smelled of baking bread and damp earth, and then, one day, had simply disappeared. She had dropped me off at school, kissed my forehead, and never come back. The police called it abandonment. I called it the moment my world cracked in half. For 10 years, I had carried that abandonment like a stone in my chest. And now, this. An inheritance. A message from a ghost. "What is it?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Mr. Davies sighed, a long, slow exhalation of pity. He pushed the envelope toward me, along with a glossy, stapled report. "It's a property, a house and a few acres of land, up in Stone Creek." I didn't know the name. "The thing is, Elara, it's not exactly a windfall." He opened the report. Inside were pictures. A small, wood-frame house, its roof sagging like a tired old spine. The porch tilted at a drunken angle, windows were boarded up, and the paint had been peeled away by years of sun and snow, leaving the wood beneath gray and splintered. Weeds and thorny bushes grew in a wild, tangled mess, slowly swallowing the structure whole. It wasn't just neglected. It looked wounded. The county condemned it 3 years ago, he said softly. The appraisal came back last week. The structure itself is valued at 0. In fact, it's a liability. It would cost more to tear it down than the land is worth. He pointed to a figure at the bottom of a page full of legal jargon. And there are back taxes owed. Almost $5,000. The hope that had flickered in my chest died, turning to a cold, familiar ash. Of course it was worthless. It was a joke. A final, cruel twist of the knife from the woman who had thrown me away. Leave the unwanted kid a worthless, broken house. It was almost poetic. However, Mr. Davies continued, oblivious to the storm in my head, there is an offer. He slid another paper toward me. It was from a company called Mountain Ridge Developments. They were offering $6,000 for the property, as is. They'll cover the back taxes and the legal fees, he explained. You'd walk away with about $500, clear. It's not much, but it's a start. Enough for a deposit on a room somewhere, first month's rent. He was trying to be helpful. He was offering me the sensible path, the easy way out. Sign the paper, take the money, and close the door on the past forever. Every rational part of my brain screamed at me to do it. $500 was a fortune. It was a lifeline. It was $499 more than I had to my name. All I had to do was sign away the last broken piece of a life I never really had. But I couldn't. I looked at the picture of the house, at its sad, sagging roof and boarded-up eyes. It was a wreck, a ruin, a liability. But it was also the only thing anyone had ever left me. It was a piece of her. And a question burned in my mind, hot and insistent. Why? Why leave me this? If she just wanted to hurt me, there were easier ways. If she wanted to be forgotten, she could have left nothing at all. Leaving me a debt, a condemned wreck? It didn't feel like cruelty. It felt like a message I couldn't understand. I want to see it, I said. Mr. Davies blinked, surprised. Ilara, there's nothing to see. The report is very thorough. The foundation is cracked, there's black mold, the roof could collapse at any moment. It's not safe. I don't care, I insisted, a stubbornness I didn't know I possessed rising in my throat. She left it to me. I want to see it before I sign it away. He studied my face for a long moment, his expression a mixture of professional concern and something that might have been reluctant respect. He saw the set of my jaw, the strange, fierce light in my eyes. He knew, as I was just beginning to understand, that this wasn't about money. It was about something else entirely. All right, he said, finally relenting. He reached into his desk and pulled out a small, tarnished brass key attached to a faded green tag. The bus to Stone Creek leaves from the downtown depot at 6 a.m. It's the only one. He handed it to me. The key was cold and heavy in my palm, a solid, tangible piece of a past I thought was lost forever. It felt less like a key and more like a question. And I knew, with a certainty that defied all logic, that I had to go find the answer. The bus ride was 6 hours of watching the world change through a dirty window. The sprawling concrete chaos of the city bled into tidy suburbs, which then gave way to rolling farmland and finally to the dense, dark woods of the mountains. The farther we went, the emptier the bus became, until it was just me, the driver, and an old man sleeping with his mouth open. The air grew colder, cleaner, smelling of pine and wet dirt. It was a smell I vaguely remembered, a ghost on the edge of my senses. I clutched the key in my pocket, the metal warmed by my hand. The bus groaned up a long, winding road and finally shuddered to a stop in what appeared to be the middle of nowhere. "Stone Creek," the driver grunted, not bothering to look back. I stepped off the bus and into a silence so profound it felt like a presence. The town wasn't much of a town at all. It was a crossroads with a gas station, a diner with a flickering neon sign, and a general store with a dusty porch. A handful of houses were scattered nearby, their lights just starting to flicker on in the gathering twilight. A thin, persistent drizzle had begun to fall, turning the air gray and soft. I asked the woman behind the counter at the general store for directions. She was old, with kind, crinkled eyes and hair the color of snow. When I told her the name on the deed, Maeve O'Connell, her expression changed. A flicker of recognition, then a deep, impenetrable sadness. "Maeve's place," she said, her voice quiet. "Lord, I haven't heard that name in years. It's about 2 miles up the old logging road. But honey, there's nothing left up there." "I know," I said. "I just need to see it." She gave me a long, searching look, then nodded slowly. "Be careful. The woods get dark fast." The walk was longer than I expected. The old logging road was more of a suggestion than a road, a ribbon of mud and gravel winding deeper and deeper into the forest. The trees grew thick and tall, their branches interlocking overhead, creating a ceiling of green that blocked out the last of the day's light. The drizzle turned into a steady, soaking rain. By the time I saw it, I was cold, wet, and filled with a growing sense of dread. The house stood in a small clearing, a dark shape against the darker gray of the sky. The pictures hadn't done it justice. They had shown its decay, but they hadn't captured its profound loneliness. It slumped in the clearing like a great, wounded animal waiting to die. The weeds were waist-high, slick with rain. A shutter banged rhythmically against the side of the house, a forlorn and lonely drumbeat. I pushed through the wet foliage, my sneakers sinking into the soft ground. The porch steps groaned in protest under my weight, but they held. The front door was swollen shut, the wood warped by years of moisture. I put the key in the lock. It was stiff, resistant. For a moment, I thought it wouldn't turn. Then, with a grating screech of metal on metal, it gave. I put my shoulder to the door and shoved. It opened with a shudder, revealing a darkness that seemed to swallow the light. The air that rushed out was thick and heavy, the smell of a decade of dust, damp, and decay. It smelled like time itself. I hesitated on the threshold, a shiver running down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. This was it. The place where my life began and where it ended. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. My foot landed on something soft. I looked down. The floor was covered in a carpet of dried leaves that had blown in through a broken window pane. Moonlight, filtered through the grimy glass, cast long, eerie shadows across the room. I could make out the shapes of furniture draped in white cloths, like ghosts huddled together in the dark. I found a switch on the wall and flicked it, a hopeful, foolish gesture. Nothing happened, of course. The power had been cut long ago. I pulled a small flashlight from my bag, the one Mr. Davies had insisted I take. Its beam cut a nervous, trembling circle through the gloom. The living room was small. A stone fireplace stood against one wall, its hearth filled with dead ashes. A sofa and 2 armchairs, all under sheets, sat in the center of the room. I pulled the sheet off one of the chairs. The floral fabric was faded and stained, but I remembered it. I had built forts out of its cushions. My fingers traced the worn pattern, and for a fleeting, painful moment, I was 5 years old again, hiding from a laughing monster who was really my grandmother. I moved through the house like a ghost myself, my flashlight beam dancing over the surfaces of a life left behind. The kitchen was a disaster. Cabinets hung open, and a fine layer of dust and grime covered everything. A single mug sat by the sink, as if waiting for a coffee that would never be brewed. Upstairs, there were 2 small bedrooms. One was clearly hers. The bed was stripped, the mattress stained and bare. The closet was empty. The other room had been mine. A small wooden bed frame stood in the corner. On the wall, faint and faded, were the outlines of where star-shaped stickers had once been stuck. I had loved those stars. I used to lie in that bed and pretend I was floating in space. Now, the room was just a sad, empty box. There was nothing here. No answers, no hidden treasures, just the slow, inevitable rot of time. Mr. Davies was right. The appraiser was right. It was worthless. A wave of despair washed over me, so strong it made my knees weak. I had come all this way for nothing. I had chased a ghost and found only an empty shell. I sank down onto the dusty floor of my old room, the cardboard box from the group home still clutched in my hands, and I let myself cry. I cried for the little girl who had put glow-in-the-dark stars on her ceiling. I cried for the teenager who had spent a decade believing she was unlovable. And I cried for the woman in the photograph, the woman who had abandoned me to this empty, broken world. After a long time, the tears stopped. I was left with a hollow, aching emptiness. The rain had eased to a gentle patter on the roof. I knew I should leave, find my way back to the town, wait for the morning bus, and go back to the city to sign the papers. Take the $500 and start my life of quiet, managed desperation. But I couldn't make myself move. Some stubborn, irrational part of me still refused to let go. This couldn't be the whole story. I stood up, my legs stiff, and went back downstairs, determined to take one last look around before I surrendered. I wandered back into the kitchen, then through a small doorway I hadn't noticed before. It led to a pantry. It was a narrow, windowless space lined with empty shelves. The air was colder here, and the smell of damp earth was stronger. I ran my flashlight along the shelves, the back wall, and that's when I saw it. At the very back of the pantry, behind where a stack of canned goods might have once stood, the wall looked wrong. It was a door. A plain, wooden door, the same as the others in the house. But it had been sealed shut. Thick, rough planks of wood had been nailed horizontally across it, and the gaps between the planks and the door frame had been crudely filled with crumbling plaster. It wasn't just closed, it was barricaded. A cold knot of fear and excitement tightened in my stomach. Why would someone seal a door like this? It wasn't to keep people out. It was to make sure no one knew a door was ever there. This was the room, the sealed room. And I knew, with a sudden, heart-pounding certainty, that whatever answers this house held were on the other side of that door. My first attempts were useless. I clawed at the plaster with my fingernails, pulled at the thick, unyielding planks. They were held fast by long, rusted nails driven deep into the doorframe. I needed a tool, a crowbar. My mind raced. The shed. There had to be a shed. I ran outside, my flashlight beam cutting wildly through the darkness. I found it behind the house, half swallowed by an overgrown lilac bush. The door was stuck, but I wrenched it open with a surge of adrenaline-fueled strength. Inside, it was a tomb of forgotten projects. Rusted garden tools, old paint cans, stacks of terracotta pots. And there, leaning in a corner, was a long, heavy crowbar. It was perfect. Back in the pantry, I wedged the tip of the crowbar behind the first plank and pushed. The wood groaned, the old nail squealing in protest. I threw my whole weight into it, my muscles straining. With a sudden, loud crack, the nail pulled free from the frame. One down. It took me the better part of an hour, my hands raw and my arms aching, but one by one, I pried the planks off the wall. They fell to the floor with heavy, dusty thuds. Finally, only the door remained. There was no handle, no keyhole. It was just a flat, blank surface. I used the crowbar again, forcing the tip into the crack between the door and the frame. I levered it back, and with a splintering shriek of tortured wood, the door swung inward into blackness. The air that flowed out was different from the rest of the house. It was stale, yes, but it was also dry, protected. I pointed my flashlight into the opening. It was a small room, no bigger than a walk-in closet. And it was almost completely empty. There was a single wooden chair, a small, sturdy desk, and on top of the desk, a gray metal lockbox. That was it. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I stepped inside. The floorboards were clean, free of the leaves and dirt that covered the rest of the house. This room had been a sanctuary, a time capsule. I walked to the desk and touched the lockbox. It wasn't locked. I lifted the lid. Inside, my breath caught in my throat. It was filled with letters. Stacks and stacks of them, tied in bundles with faded ribbon. They were all addressed in a neat, elegant cursive. For Ilara. My name, written over and over. And on the very top of the pile, there was a single, thick envelope, thicker than the rest. On the front, it just said, "Read this first." My hands were trembling so badly I could barely pick it up. I sank into the wooden chair, the only piece of furniture in the room, and carefully tore open the seal. Inside were several pages, filled with that same familiar, yet unknown handwriting. I took a deep, shuddering breath and began to read. "My dearest Ilara," the letter began. "If you are reading this, then it means two things. First, that I am gone. And second, that you have come home. I am so sorry, my love. I am sorry for everything." The words blurred through my tears. I wiped my eyes with the back of my dusty hand and forced myself to continue. "I know you must hate me. You have every right to. I know you believe I abandoned you. But I need you to know that it is not the truth. Every day for the past 10 years, I have lived with the choice I made, and every day it has broken my heart anew. But I would make it again. To protect you, I would do it all again." The letter went on to explain. It was a story I had never known, a secret history of my own life. My grandmother Maeve hadn't been a simple baker. Before I was born, she had been involved with a dangerous man, a man who ran a criminal enterprise in the city. She had been young and foolish, and she had acted as his bookkeeper. She saw everything, knew where all the money was hidden, all the crimes were buried. When she found out she was pregnant with my mother, she ran. She escaped, changed her name, and started a new life in Stone Creek, hoping he would never find her. For years, she was safe. My mother grew up, met my father, and then I was born. But tragedy struck. My parents were killed in a car accident when I was 2, and I came to live with Maeve. And for 6 years we had a life. A quiet, happy, simple life. But her past caught up to her. The man, whose name she never wrote, she only ever called him the Wolf, had finally tracked her down. He didn't want revenge. He wanted what she knew. He believed she had stolen from him, that she had a ledger detailing all his crimes, and he was determined to get it back. He sent his men. They started by threatening her, showing up at the diner, following her home. She knew it was only a matter of time before they turned their attention to me. "He would have used you to get to me, Ilara," she wrote, her handwriting growing shaky. "He would have hurt you. I could not let that happen. I had to make you disappear. I had to make it look like I was a monster, a grandmother who would abandon her own flesh and blood. It was the only way the state would take you in and hide you, give you a new name, a new life, where he could never find you. That morning, when I dropped you at school, was the hardest day of my life. I drove away, and I did not look back, because if I had, I would not have had the strength to go on. I became a ghost so that you could live. I had to stop reading. A strangled sob escaped my lips, a sound of such profound pain and relief that it felt like it was being torn from my soul. 10 years. 10 years of carrying the weight of being unwanted. 10 years of believing I was a piece of trash someone had thrown away. And it was all a lie. It wasn't abandonment. It was a sacrifice. A terrible, brutal, and beautiful act of love. She hadn't thrown me away. She had pushed me into a lifeboat and stayed on the sinking ship. I sat there in the dark, silent room, the letter clutched in my hand, and I wept. I wept for her, for the lonely, terrified life she must have lived. I wept for myself, for the lost years and the needless pain. The anger I had carried for so long dissolved, replaced by a grief so vast it felt like it could drown me. But beneath the grief, something else was stirring. A tiny, fragile seed of something I hadn't felt in a very long time. It was a sense of belonging. This house, this broken, worthless house, was not a tomb. It was a monument. It was the physical manifestation of her sacrifice. And this room, this sealed, secret room, was its heart. After a while, my breathing evened out. The storm inside me had passed, leaving a strange, quiet calm. I wasn't the same person who had walked into this house. The girl who believed she was worthless was gone, and in her place was someone new, someone who was loved, someone who was protected. I picked up the letter again, my hands steadier now. There was more. "This house is more than just a house, Elara," she wrote. "I knew they would come for it eventually. The Wolf's associates have become legitimate. They run a development company now, buying up land, looking for what they think I hid. They will try to take this place from you. They will tell you it's worthless. Do not believe them. Its worth is not in its timber or its land. I have left you what I could. It is not much, but it is a start. It is hidden where a home's heart should be. You must be strong. You must be clever. This house protected me. Now let it protect you. A home's heart. The fireplace." The words echoed in my mind. I folded the letter, my mind racing. This was no longer just about understanding the past. It was about the future. It was a choice. I could take this new, painful truth, go back to the city, and try to build a life from the rubble. Or I could stay. I could fight for this place. I could honor her sacrifice by refusing to let them win. I looked around the small, secret room, at the stacks of letters she had written to a girl who would never receive them. She had spent 10 years alone in this house, watching from a distance, saving, planning, hoping that one day I would come home. How could I walk away from that? How could I let her story end with a bulldozer and a developer's profit margin? The choice wasn't a choice at all. I was staying. I spent the rest of the night reading. I lit a few old candles I found in a kitchen drawer, their flickering light making the shadows dance. The letters were a chronicle of a stolen decade. She wrote to me on my birthdays, on holidays, on random Tuesday afternoons. She told me about her day, about the garden she tried to keep, about the loneliness that was her constant companion. She had kept track of me through Mr. Davies, getting discreet updates, ensuring I was safe. She knew which foster homes I'd been in, knew when I'd been moved to the group home. Every letter was filled with love, with pain, and with a fierce, unbreakable hope. In one of the last letters, written only a few months before she must have died, she explained everything in more detail. The development company, Mountain Ridge, was a front for the Wolf's old network. They were systematically buying up all the properties in the area, consolidating their power, and still searching for the ledger they were convinced she had. "They think I have proof of their crimes," she wrote. "The truth is, I destroyed all that years ago. There's nothing for them to find. But they will never believe that. Their greed and paranoia won't let them. They will not stop until they have torn this house apart. Which is why you must be the one to rebuild it." And then she told me where to look. "Every house has a heart, my love, a hearth. Go to the fireplace. Look for the stone that does not match. The third one from the left, on the bottom row. It is loose. Behind it, you will find everything I was able to save for you. Use it to pay the taxes. Use it to fix the roof. Use it to build a life. That is my real legacy. Not a book of old sins, but a future for you." By the time dawn broke, painting the gray sky with strokes of pink and orange, I had read every word. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, but I was also filled with a sense of purpose I had never known. I was no longer a victim of my past. I was the guardian of my grandmother's legacy. I went to the fireplace in the living room. The stones were thick with soot and dust. I knelt down, my heart pounding, and examined the bottom row, third from the left. At first, it looked just like the others. But when I pushed on it, it shifted slightly. My fingers scrabbled at the edges, and with a scraping sound, the stone came loose. I pulled it out. Behind it was a dark, hollow space. I reached inside, my fingers closing around a cold, metal box. It was an old ammunition can, heavy and solid. I pulled it out and set it on the floor. It was sealed with a simple latch. I lifted it, and the lid creaked open. Inside was not a ledger. It was cash. Stacks of it, wrapped in rubber bands. And on top, a simple, notarized deed to the house, free and clear, with my name on it, dated from 10 years ago. She had put it in my name the day she left me. She had been paying the taxes herself, secretly, until she got too sick to continue. I counted the money. It was just over $20,000. It was a fortune. It was enough. Enough to pay the taxes, enough to hire a lawyer, enough to start fixing the roof. It was the future she had saved for me, $1 at a time. I sat back on my heels, the ammo box in my lap, and I laughed. It was a strange, watery sound, half laugh, half sob. The appraiser had valued this place at 0. The lawyers had called it a liability. They had seen only the rot, the decay, the broken surface. They couldn't see the truth. They couldn't see the fierce, stubborn love that had been poured into its foundations, that was hidden behind its very stones. They couldn't appraise a mother's sacrifice. Later that morning, I walked back into town. I must have looked a sight, covered in dust and plaster, my face stained with tears, but clutching a key and a plan. At the general store, I bought a coffee and a sweet roll, the first food I'd had in almost 24 hours. The old woman from the day before was behind the counter. She looked at me, a question in her kind eyes. "I'm staying," I told her, my voice clear and strong. "It's my home." A slow smile spread across her face. "I'm glad to hear it," she said. "Maeve was a good woman. This town missed her." From a payphone outside the store, I called Mr. Davies. He sounded sleepy, but he woke up quickly when I started talking. "I'm not signing the papers," I said. "I'm keeping the house, and I need you to do something for me. I need you to find me the best, meanest property lawyer in the state, because I'm about to go to war with Mountain Ridge Developments." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could picture him in his kitchen, rubbing his tired eyes, trying to process what I was saying. The lost cause, the scared kid from the group home, was suddenly giving orders. "Ilara," he said slowly, "what did you find up there?" "I found the truth," I said, "and I'm not running anymore." The days that followed were a blur of activity. I used some of the cash to rent a room at the small motel in town and buy some basic supplies: work gloves, cleaning products, buckets, and a sturdy new flashlight. Every morning, I would walk the 2 miles to the house, and every evening, I would walk back, exhausted but exhilarated. I started with the inside. I pulled off the dusty sheets, beat them outside until clouds of forgotten years billowed into the air, and then washed them in the motel's laundry room. I swept the floors, clearing out the leaves and the dirt, the dead insects and the ghosts of the past. I scrubbed the grime from the kitchen counters, washed the windows until the sunlight, for the first time in a decade, could stream inside, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Each act of cleaning felt like an act of defiance, an act of reclamation. I wasn't just cleaning a house. I was scrubbing away the narrative of abandonment and neglect that had defined my life. With every sweep of the broom, I was saying, "This place is not forgotten." With every clean window pane, I was saying, "I am here, and I can see clearly now." Mr. Davies, true to his word, found me a lawyer. Her name was Amelia Thorne, and she was exactly what I had asked for. She was sharp, no nonsense. And when I told her the whole story over the phone, from the sealed room to the ammo box to the development company, she didn't sound surprised. She sounded angry. "It's a classic predatory acquisition strategy," she said, her voice crisp and cold. "They use shell corporations to harass landowners with legal notices and lowball offers, trying to scare them into selling valuable property for pennies on the dollar. They prey on the elderly, the vulnerable," she paused, "and the newly orphaned. This is what they do, but we're going to make them regret it." The first thing we did was pay the back taxes. I wired the money from the bank in the next town over. The clerk at the county office was shocked. They had already begun foreclosure proceedings. With that single transaction, the house was mine, legally and unequivocally. The next day, a man in a new pickup truck drove up the logging road. He was wearing a polo shirt with the Mountain Ridge Developments logo on it. He got out and tacked a notice to my front door, a final aggressive offer, full of legal threats and a 72-hour deadline. I was on the porch, drinking a bottle of water. I watched him do it. He didn't see me at first. "Can I help you?" I asked calmly. He jumped, startled. He saw a teenage girl in dirty jeans, not the vulnerable target he was expecting. "This property is condemned," he said, puffing out his chest. "You're trespassing." "Actually," I said, taking a sip of water, "I'm the owner, and you're the one who's trespassing. My lawyer will be in touch about that. You can take your notice with you." I pointed at the paper he'd just nailed to my door. He stared at me, his blustering confidence faltering. He saw something in my eyes he hadn't anticipated. He saw a fight. He ripped the notice off the door, crumpled it in his fist, and got back in his truck without another word, spitting gravel as he sped away. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental. I had stood my ground. I hadn't flinched. The real work was just beginning. The house needed everything. A new roof, new plumbing, new wiring. The $20,000 was a start, but it wouldn't be enough for all of it. But it was enough to begin. I hired a local contractor, a grizzled old man named Ben who had known my grandmother. "Maeve was tough as nails," he told me, standing on the porch and surveying the sagging roof. "Glad to see she passed it on." He gave me a fair price and a promise to do the work in stages as I could afford it. He started on the roof. The sound of his hammer, echoing through the clearing day after day, was the most hopeful sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of rebuilding. It was the sound of a future being nailed into place. I started working in the garden. Beneath the thorns and the weeds, I found the bones of what had once been a beautiful space. I found her rose bushes, wild and overgrown but still alive. I found paving stones for a path and the faint outline of a vegetable patch. I spent my days pulling weeds, my hands calloused and sore, my back aching. But as I cleared the land, I felt like I was clearing my own soul. I was letting the light in. I was making space for new things to grow. I never found a ledger. My grandmother had told the truth. There were no secrets buried here, no evidence for them to find. Their whole campaign of harassment was built on a ghost story, on a paranoid fantasy. The only treasure in this house was the one she had left for me, the treasure of a second chance. My lawyer, Amelia, went on the offensive. She filed a lawsuit against Mountain Ridge for harassment and predatory practices. She started digging into their corporate structure, and it wasn't long before she found connections to the city's criminal underworld, just as Maeve had said. The fight isn't over. It will probably go on for years. But I'm not afraid. This place, this worthless, broken-down house, has taught me how to be strong. It has shown me what is truly valuable. It's not about the money, or the land, or the legal battles. It's about standing on your own ground, on a foundation of love and sacrifice, and refusing to be moved. Some evenings, I sit on the porch, the new porch that Ben built, and I look out at the trees. The house is still a work in progress. There are still leaks to fix and floors to sand, but it's solid, it's safe, and it's mine. I think about the appraiser who saw nothing of value here, He used a checklist: foundation, plumbing, wiring. He measured the rot. But he couldn't measure the strength of the person who had lived here. He couldn't put a price on the love that was sealed in that back room, waiting for me to find it. So many of us are told that parts of our lives, or parts of ourselves, are worthless. We get appraisals from the outside world, from our pasts, from our own fears, and they tell us we are broken, condemned, a liability. But what this story taught me, what this house taught me, is that the true value of a thing, or a person, is never on the surface. It's hidden. It's in the sealed rooms, in the stories no one else knows, in the sacrifices that were made for us, and in the strength we didn't know we had until we were tested. Have you ever been told something in your life was worthless, only to find out it was the most valuable thing you had? Maybe it was a relationship, a dream, or a piece of your own history. I want you to think about that, because somewhere inside you, there's a sealed room, a place where your real value is stored. It might be behind a wall of fear or pain or regret, but it's there. And you have the key. All you have to do is be brave enough to use it, to break down the door and reclaim what is yours. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a comment below. Share a story about a time you found worth in an unexpected place. I read every single one because this community is built on the idea that our stories matter, that our broken places are where the light gets in. You are not worthless. You are not a liability. You are a treasure, waiting to be rediscovered.
Voilà, voilà. Bon, est-ce qu'on continue la quête principale? Eh ben, j'ai fait pareil, Teddy. J'ai commencé la manette et j'ai basculé direct clavier-souris. Pour les donjons, ouais, mais pour le moment, les donjons, on les a fait. Faut que j'avance sur la quête, là. Merci, MG. Johnny, on va dire Johnny, ça te va? Merci pour ton follow, bienvenue. Bon, voilà, maintenant que j'ai eu bien chaud. Alors, du coup, c'est ce que je vous disais, j'ai été obligée d'avancer, les amis. J'ai fait pas mal de petites quêtes secondaires, on a fait pas mal de farms. Il m'en reste, hein, clairement. On va essayer de prendre le plus d'avance possible pour la prochaine bannière. Et bah, on va aller faire la quête principale. Alors...